Everyone. I am here to talk a little bit about editing for accessibility. And the purpose of this video is to share with you a little bit about editing for accessibility, which is a topic I think most of you know I'm pretty passionate about, and one that can be seen as an important step for us as editors to ensure that documents, texts, and other informational materials are ready for the users and for the audience. Historically, accessibility issues were directly related to persons with physical disabilities, or as I like to put it, people with differently able bodies. The civil rights movement of the 60s recognized the need to remove barriers of access, particularly of physical spaces at that time, and barriers of our environment. Things like ramps for access to a building, for example, are part of those initial efforts to promote accessibility. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a timeline of the information accessibility efforts evolution. With the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, removing barriers of access, including access to information, became mandated for government agencies and government-related individuals. The American Disability Act of 1990 secured legal rights to people with disabilities. And then the Web Accessibility Initiative of 1997 promoted even more awareness and some guidelines to create accessibility to digital materials. In 1998, the Rehabilitation Act was amended to include Section 508, requiring accessibility of digital information from all federal and government-related agencies. As the awareness of inclusion and accessibility evolved, so did those guidelines with revisions of the 508 section of the Rehabilitation Act, and there was an updating of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which came from that initial Web Accessibility Initiative. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is known as the WCAG, and the latest version is the WCAG WCAG 2.1, which now includes accessibility in mobile devices as well. As editors, then, it is important for us to remember that accessibility is not only an ethical issue, but in many cases, it can be related to legal issues as well. It might be part of our editing process to identify the shortcomings of a document that could legally implicate or impact our authors and our clients. As an ethical issue, accessibility can be simply looked at as the right thing to do, because it is the right thing to do, right? However, that would make the editing of digital texts for accessibility more of like something like a charity act, as suggested in one of the articles that I put in my annotated bibliography, A Version of Access. This charity-like approach make the steps to achieve true accessibility rather insufficient, because accessibility isn't just about the add-ons, the supplements, or the basics like alternative text and captions, even though those steps are very important too. Some disability scholars argue that disability isn't about the audience's actual physical abilities, because then that would assume a certain perspective of what normal is. Our bodies are not lacking, they say, that our bodies are not lacking. Our environments and our systems are. There are many physical and technological barriers to people's diverse physical, cognitive, and even social abilities. So for us, it would help to reframe the concept of disability as one that all of us, we will all face at some point in our lives or in a particular context. It can be anything from not physically being able to see or read something to also not be able to process a very text-heavy form or even access the internet. So as editors, we have the opportunity, and I believe the duty, to advocate for our audiences and users, because we do understand how impactful information can be. Lisa Meloncon, editor of the essay collection Rhetorical Accessibility, suggests that technical communication could ideally be seen as the bridge between disability studies and web accessibility practices. So, from a practical approach, checking a document for required accessibility features, such as the alternative text for images, captions or audio descriptions for videos, or even something as simple as properly organized headings, could really make a difference for access. As editors, we are in the position that we can make these practices normalized. We can make them part of the process of editing as opposed to an afterthought. Advocating for accessibility is an important step to ensure our users and our audience will truly be able to use the documents we're working on. So here I have shared my annotated bibliography, as well as a Google document filled with links that can support editing for accessibility. I collected those last semester when I took an accessibility course with Dr. Huntsman. I also share a link to a website that I created for an assignment for that class, in which we had to edit some technical artifacts for them to become accessible. So applying some of the features can certainly be more, some of the accessibility features can certainly be more challenging than others. Like tagging a PDF document, for example, can be very time consuming, very complicated, and even costly. Especially if we don't know what we're doing. But with practice, and especially with good resources, we can make editing for accessibility just another normalized step of the editing process. So here's a quick exercise for you. Sorry, I'm not supposed to give you assignments, but can't help it. So here's a quick exercise. If you go to one of the website accessibility checkers that I will link here in this discussion board, type or cut and paste the URL of any website and check its accessibility scores. You can also check what's missing, what can be fixed. You will realize that there is plenty of work to be done in accessibility. In fact, some of the statistics point that maybe only 3% of the websites we can find today are actually fully accessible. So those are my little bits about accessibility. I have links here again that can help you understand it better, and I hope this can spark some good discussion about accessibility features. Thank you.